From Puducherry, Sri Aurobindo died in 1950. He had, by then, almost completed his great philosophy. In 1872, in Calcutta, a boy was born named Aurobindo Ghose. His father was a doctor who had returned from medical training in Aberdeen, Scotland. The father, an admirer of British education, decided that his sons should be raised in England from a young age, in complete ignorance of Indian culture, so that they could compete on equal terms with the British elite. Aurobindo was sent to England at 7. He grew up in Manchester, Cambridge, and London. He did not learn Bengali. He did not learn Sanskrit. He studied Greek and Latin and won classical prizes at Cambridge. He was being trained, in the Victorian way, to be an English gentleman. He returned to India at 21. He knew almost nothing about his own country. He spoke English better than any Indian language. But within a few years of his return, he had become one of the most fierce voices for Indian independence anywhere in the country. Aurobindo settled in Bengal. He learned Bengali rapidly. He learned Sanskrit. He read the Vedas. He became a teacher at Baroda College, then later a journalist. He wrote scorching editorials calling for complete independence from British rule, at a time when most of the moderate Indian National Congress was asking only for limited reforms. He helped organize the Swadeshi movement. He was, by 1908, one of the most watched revolutionaries in India. The British arrested him on charges of conspiracy. He spent a year in Alipore jail, in a small cell, awaiting trial that he was widely expected to lose by execution. He emerged from the trial acquitted, through the brilliant defense of the lawyer Chittaranjan Das, but a changed man. He had, he said quietly, a profound spiritual experience inside the jail. He had been visited, he said, by Krishna. He no longer believed political action alone could save India. He believed a deeper transformation was needed. He moved south. In 1910, to escape further British surveillance, Aurobindo escaped to Pondicherry, a small French colonial enclave on the southeastern coast of India. Pondicherry was, technically, French territory. British authorities could not arrest him there. He intended to stay for a few months. He stayed for the next 40 years. He lived in a small house at Rue de la Marine. He gradually withdrew from political life entirely. He began an enormous philosophical project. He was attempting to construct, in dialogue with the ancient Indian seers, a complete description of what he called the integral yoga, a path of spiritual development that was meant to apply not only to monks and ascetics but to ordinary people living in the modern world. He wrote enormous books. The Life Divine, The Synthesis of Yoga, Savitri, an epic poem of 24,000 lines. He almost never spoke. On the other side of the world, in Paris, there lived a woman named Mir Alfassa. She was born in 1878 to a Sephardic Jewish family from Egypt and Turkey, who had settled in France. She was an unusual woman by any standard. She was a painter. She was a musician. She was a philosopher. She studied with the spiritual teacher Max Thion in Tlemcen, Algeria. She had, from childhood, vivid dreams of a tall dark Indian man whom she did not recognize. She did not yet know who he was. By 1914, she had decided to travel to India to find him. She arrived in Pondicherry on March 29, 1914. She was introduced to Sri Aurobindo for the first time. She looked at him. She recognized, instantly, the face from her dreams. He looked at her with the same recognition. They had, in some sense, already known each other before either had been born. Mira returned to France during the First World War. She came back to Pondicherry in 1920 to stay. She became Aurobindo's spiritual collaborator. Slowly, very slowly, a small group of disciples, Indian and European, began to gather around them. The two of them never quite intended this. They had hoped to live in seclusion and write. But the disciples kept arriving. By 1926, an ashram had organically formed around Aurobindo's house. He retreated, that year, into complete silence, communicating only in writing. Mira, by now called by everyone, simply, the mother, took over the practical running of the ashram. She managed everything. Food, housing, finances, spiritual instruction, letters, visitors. She did it for the next 50 years. She was, by all accounts, an extraordinary administrator and an even more extraordinary spiritual teacher. Sri Aurobindo died in 1950. He had, by then, almost completed his great philosophical and poetic works. The cause of death given was uremia. His disciples believed he had withdrawn voluntarily. The mother continued the work alone. She did not break stride. She had been running the ashram for decades. Now she ran it without him. She received visitors. She wrote new commentaries. She edited his unpublished works. And in the early 1960s, when she was already in her 80s, she began to propose a completely new project, one that no ashram had ever attempted before. She wanted to found a township. Not a religious community. Not an Indian community. A universal township. A place where, she said, men and women of every nation, every race, every religion, could come and live together as a single human race, learning what it meant to be human, before any of the divisions. She named the township Auroville, the city of dawn. She chose a site on a flat barren plateau just north of Pondicherry, in Tamil Nadu, an entirely deforested, dusty, sun-baked stretch of land where nothing grew. She acquired the land patiently. She designed the master plan. The city, she said, would be circular, with 4 zones, the residential zone, the cultural zone, the industrial zone, and the international zone, radiating outward from a central Matrimandir, a great spherical meditation chamber. Auroville was inaugurated on February 28, 1968. UNESCO endorsed the project. Earth from 124 countries and 23 Indian states was placed in a single ceremonial urn at the city's center. 5,000 people attended. The mother was 89. She spoke to the gathered visitors. She said simply, "Greetings from Auroville to all men of goodwill." She withdrew from public life shortly afterward. She passed away in 1973. Today, Auroville has about 3,000 permanent residents from over 60 countries. The Matrimandir is finished, a massive golden sphere visible from many kilometers away. The barren plateau has been reforested with 2 million trees planted by Aurovillians over 50 years. The ashram at Pondicherry is still active. Sri Aurobindo's room is preserved as he left it. The mother's chair is still in the meditation hall. Pondicherry itself, now officially Puducherry, a union territory of the Indian Union, has become a global pilgrimage destination for those interested in the strange spiritual experiment that began when a Bengali revolutionary, exiled by the British, met a French painter who had been dreaming of his face for 20 years, and they together built something that neither of them, at the start, could quite have imagined. A small French enclave on the Tamil coast had, by accident, hosted one of the largest spiritual movements of the 20th century. And it began, the elders say, because a man and a woman recognized each other across a room and decided to work together. Tomorrow's story comes from another corner of India. Subscribe to walk with us through the folklore of every region in your language.